My parents said they wouldn't pay for my life-saving medical treatment because they needed the money for my brother's education. Luckily my aunt saved me. But I secretly did this, and they came to regret their choice for years to come. I was 15 when I found out my life wasn't worth the price of a college degree. I still remember the way my mom sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded like we were discussing what to have for dinner, not whether I was going to live or die. My dad stood behind her with his arms crossed, silent like usual. They had just gotten off the phone with the insurance company. I knew the treatment wasn't covered. I knew it was going to be expensive. But I also thought I knew, that they had savings. Not a ton but enough. They'd mentioned it more than once. So I asked, "What now?" My mom looked at me with that weirdly calm face she always made when she was about to say something awful. "We're not going to move forward with the treatment." At first I didn't understand. I thought maybe she meant they wanted a second opinion. Or were waiting for more information. I was confused, not scared. Yet. "What do you mean?" I asked. She let out a soft sigh like I was making this harder than it needed to be. "Sweetie, we've talked about it. Your father and I think, if it's meant to be, God will make it work out." I blinked. "What?" Dad finally spoke. "We can't afford to spend everything on this. Caleb's starting university next year. His future, his tuition, his housing, that's all lined up. We can't throw that away." Throw that away? I stared at them. I couldn't even breathe for a second. I wasn't naive. I knew they always favored Caleb. He was the golden boy. He got new clothes, summer camps, tutoring, attention. I got leftovers in silence. But I never thought. I never actually believed they'd let me die. "You're choosing college over me?" My voice came out small. My mom looked almost offended. "Don't say it like that. It's not a choice. We're just trusting in God's plan." I sat there, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. I wanted to scream. Or cry. Or throw something. But I didn't. Instead I stood up, went to my room and closed the door. I didn't come out for the rest of the night. They didn't knock. That was the moment it hit me. If I wanted to live, I was going to have to do it alone. So I opened my laptop. I started Googling. Can a minor disown their parents for medical neglect? Can I get free healthcare if I'm in foster care? Does juvenile detention include medical treatment? I'm not kidding. For a few minutes I honestly considered committing a crime just bad enough to get me arrested, but not so bad I'd be locked away forever. I figured jail had to have some kind of medical care, right? Sounds ridiculous now. But at the time I was desperate. I found out I could file for emancipation, but it usually required parental consent, or a judge's ruling, which would take time I didn't have. There were shelters, but they were full or too far. And I didn't want to go to some stranger. Then I thought of Ruth. My mom's older sister. She lived about 40 minutes away. We didn't see her often. My parents used to talk about her like she was some sad little failure. Said she lived in a shoebox apartment and worked part-time tutoring kids who barely passed. They laughed at her for never getting married, for throwing her money away on stray animals and takeout food. But I remembered her being kind. Every time we did see her, she made a point to talk to me. Not just hello are you talk, but real talk. She looked at me like she actually saw me. Like she cared. So I didn't reach out. Not yet. I wasn't ready to ask for help. I just wanted to survive the night. I packed a bag. Some clothes, my ID, a charger. I took the little bit of cash I had hidden in a jar in my closet. Maybe $70 total. I waited until after midnight. Listened to the creak of the hallway floorboards, the click of their bedroom door. And then I left. Just like that. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I walked 5 blocks before I found a bench near the 24-hour grocery store. I sat there for a long time just thinking. I thought about how I used to believe my parents loved me. Not the way they loved Caleb, sure. But I thought maybe deep down they still cared. I thought about the way my mom had held my hand when I was little, how she used to read to me at night, before Caleb started middle school and everything shifted. I thought about my dad teaching him how to drive while I sat inside doing dishes. And I thought about how, now that I needed them most, they'd chosen to spend that money on someone else. Not a stranger. Not a neighbor. My brother. And not just for anything. For college. As if that somehow mattered more than whether I lived to see 16. I sat on that bench until the sky started to lighten. I didn't cry. I just planned. Because I wasn't going back. Whatever happened next, whatever I had to do, wherever I had to go, I was going to find a way to stay alive. Without them. I didn't sleep that first night. I watched the sky change from black to gray, then to gold as the sun came up. People passed me on the sidewalk. Some with coffee cups, some walking dogs, a few in suits with their heads down. No one looked at me. I think that's what hit me hardest. How invisible I was. Just a girl on a bench with a backpack. No one stopped to ask if I was okay. Not that I expected them to. I was used to not being seen. I'd gotten good at it. Not in a sad, melodramatic way, just in a quiet, practiced way. I knew how to disappear in plain sight. How to take up as little space as possible. That's what it had been like at home for as long as I could remember. My parents weren't abusive in the way people expect. They didn't yell or hit or lock me in a closet. They didn't need to. Ignoring someone completely is its own kind of violence. Caleb, my older brother, was the star. The day he was born, I think the spotlight just permanently snapped toward him. And when I came along 2 years later, I was an afterthought. They'd never say that out loud, of course. They'd smile and say they loved us equally, but it was a lie so thin you could see through it with your eyes closed. When Caleb got sick, it was a family emergency. Everyone dropped what they were doing. When I got sick, I was told to drink some tea and rest. When he won a science fair, my parents threw a party. When I placed second in a writing competition, my mom said, "That's nice, sweetie. Can you set the table now?" It wasn't just big moments either. It was the small, constant choices. Caleb got new shoes every semester. Nike's always name brand. I wore the same pair for 2 years until they split at the heel. He got a laptop for school when he turned 13. I got a hand-me-down that barely turned on. He got driving lessons. I got told we'd figure it out later. And I believed it would come later. That eventually it would be my turn. That if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, proved myself enough, they'd see me. I spent years trying to earn their attention like it was a scholarship. One time in 7th grade, I got a perfect report card. Straight as. I showed it to my dad, proud for once, hopeful. He glanced at it and said, "That's expected of you. Caleb struggles more, so his achievements mean more." I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I didn't show him my grades after that. Even birthdays were different. Caleb always got a party. Balloons, gifts, a fancy cake with his name written in blue icing. My 15th birthday? My mom forgot. I only got a text that said, "Oh, happy birthday. Sorry, busy day at work." I remember reading it while sitting alone at the bus stop after school. I'd bought myself a cupcake from the cafeteria and ate it while waiting for the ride home. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just numb. But even with all of that, I never thought they'd let me die. That's the part that still doesn't feel real sometimes. I thought they loved me even if it wasn't the same way they loved Caleb. I thought if it came down to it, if my life was on the line, they'd step up. They didn't. They chose him. But this time it wasn't over a pair of shoes or a school trip or a birthday. It was my life. And they walked away from it like it was nothing. I tried to tell myself they were scared. That maybe they didn't understand the diagnosis or they were overwhelmed. But I'd seen their faces. Calm, steady, resigned. They had known what they were doing. That's what sent me running. Not just fear but clarity. I wasn't safe in that house. Not because they'd hurt me, but because they wouldn't save me. So I ran. And now I was sitting on a park bench with a backpack full of clothes and $73 in cash. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I wasn't going back. For a second I thought about calling my school counselor. But I knew how that would go. Mandatory reports. Child services. Maybe foster care. Maybe worse. I'd seen enough news stories to know that even well-meaning systems don't always protect kids. Then I thought about Ruth. My mom's sister. The only adult in my life who ever treated me like I mattered. I hadn't seen her in almost a year. My parents didn't like inviting her over. Said she was negative and always judging. In reality, I think she just made them uncomfortable. Because she saw through them. She never bought into the perfect family act. Once when I was maybe 10, I overheard my mom on the phone with Ruth. They were arguing. My mom said, "We're doing fine, Ruth. You don't need to lecture us on parenting." Ruth's voice came through the speaker, sharp and clear. "I'm not lecturing. I'm just wondering why Elena looks like she hasn't been hugged in weeks." That sentence hit me like a truck. Because it was true. She saw me. Even then. And now, sitting on a park bench with the morning sun warming my back and nothing but fear in my chest, I realized something. She was the only person in the world I trusted. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe she'd let me crash on her couch for a night or two. Maybe she'd help me figure out how to talk to someone, find a social worker, apply for help. I didn't expect anything more than that. Because Ruth was poor. My parents never stopped reminding me of that. She can barely take care of herself, my dad would mutter. Lives like a hermit, my mom added. You should feel lucky we provide what she can't. I didn't believe them, not really. But their words echoed in my head now as I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at her number. My hands shook as I dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then she picked up. Hello. I opened my mouth, and for the first time since leaving home, I felt tears burning at the edges of my eyes. Ruth, I said. It's me. Elena. I waited for her to ask what was wrong. To sound confused. She didn't. She just said, "Where are you?" And when I told her, she said two words I'll never forget. Stay there. He was coming. She pulled up 10 minutes later in a faded red car with one window that wouldn't roll up all the way. The moment I saw her, I nearly lost it. My legs felt numb, like I'd forgotten how to stand. I grabbed my bag and moved toward the car before she could even park properly. She got out, eyes scanning me head to toe like she was checking if I was real. I didn't know what to expect. Shock, questions, maybe even a lecture. But she didn't say anything. Just opened her arms, and I walked into them like I'd been waiting my whole life to be held. She didn't ask why I was there. Didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Let's get you warm." We drove in silence most of the way. I stared out the window and she didn't press me. That's what I'd always liked about Ruth. She never forced closeness. She made room for it. Her apartment was small. Really small. It was one of those older buildings with creaky floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry, and for the first time in days I felt something close to safe. I offered to sleep on the floor. Said I could just crash for one night, two max. She didn't even respond to that. Just handed me a pair of soft pajamas and said, "You're taking the bed. I've got the couch." I didn't argue. I didn't have it in me. That night, I curled up under a worn quilt that smelled like her and let the warmth settle into my bones. For the first time since the diagnosis, I slept. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of eggs cracking in the kitchen. I hadn't heard that sound in a long time. At home, breakfast meant a granola bar and a reminder not to make the counters messy. Ruth handed me a plate without asking if I was hungry. I hadn't realized how starving I was until I started eating. When I was halfway through, she finally asked, "Are you ready to tell me what happened?" I froze. I hadn't planned how to say it. It all still felt unreal, like I'd made it up. I swallowed, put my fork down, and told her everything. About the doctor's appointment. About the diagnosis. About how my parents sat me down and said word for word, "We can't afford both." About how they wanted to leave it in God's hands. Her face didn't change as I spoke. But I could see the way her grip tightened around her mug. How her shoulders went stiff and sharp. I told her about the research I did that night, how I Googled whether I'd get free treatment if I was a ward of the state, how I thought about getting arrested just to qualify for care, and how, when none of that felt right, I packed a bag and left. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're not going back there." It wasn't a question. I looked at her, unsure. "But, your apartment, there's barely room." "I know you don't have." He cut me off. "Don't worry about what I don't have. Worry about staying alive. We'll figure the rest out." I didn't cry. But something cracked in me that morning. Something I didn't know I'd been holding up all this time. Because she didn't say, "Let's think about it." She didn't say, "I'll call them." She didn't say, "Let me see what I can do." She said, "You're not going back." Like it was already decided. Like she'd known it from the moment she picked up the phone. That afternoon she started making calls. He got a list of doctors, clinics, specialists. She asked about payment plans. Told them the situation straight. She's 15. Her parents aren't paying. "I'll cover what I can." When one place quoted a number that made me feel sick, she didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "Okay. Thank you." Then she started making other calls. I overheard her talking to a friend, asking if they knew anyone who might want to sublet a room or split an apartment or even buy a small condo. The next day, I watched her take a folder out of a drawer and flip through paperwork. Deeds, retirement accounts, bonds. She sat with a calculator, silent, making lists. I tried to stop her. "Ruth, you don't have to do this," I said. This isn't your responsibility. She looked up at me. Your family, my parents, are nothing to me anymore, she finished. Her voice was calm, steady. You are. That's all that matters. By the end of the week, she'd put her condo on the market. It was a tiny place, but it was hers. Paid off. Cozy. Full of books and memories and chipped mugs she refused to throw away. And she was selling it. For me. She never made a big speech. Never said, look what I'm giving up. Never cried or asked for anything in return. Just said, the sooner we get you treatment, the better. That's when I broke. I didn't sob. It wasn't messy. I just sat on the couch and let a single tear slide down my cheek and said, I didn't think anyone would do this for me. She came and sat beside me. Didn't say anything. Just took my hand. That night, I lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how differently things could have gone. If I'd stayed home. If I'd waited. If I hadn't called her. I thought about what my parents would say if they knew where I was. What they'd do if they realized someone else had stepped in where they wouldn't. And I thought for the first time about how much power they'd given up when they made their choice. They'd written me off. But I was still here. And thanks to Ruth, I was going to stay here. Alive. Healing. Watching. They didn't know it yet, but their decision was going to come back to them. Soon I would do something that would change everything. The first few weeks after my treatment ended were the hardest. People think recovery is this glorious upward climb, like the worst is over and everything just gets better. But it's not. It's messy and slow. It's full of side effects and strange pain and long stretches of feeling stuck between getting better and still being broken. Ruth didn't rush me. She cooked, cleaned, handled the bills, sat with me in silence when I didn't feel like talking, and listened without interruption when I did. She treated my healing like it was the most important project in the world. And somehow, little by little, I came back. My body stopped shaking when I stood too long. I could keep food down. I started walking further each day, talking more, sleeping more than an hour at a time. I still had nothing to give her. Not then. But I promised myself that when the time came, she would never want for anything again. And even as I worked on getting stronger, I felt something else building inside me. Not anger. Not hate. Just this cold, steady knowledge that I couldn't let what they did disappear into silence. They tried to erase me. They'd written me off like a bad investment. And yet I was still here. Breathing. Healing. Watching. So I started thinking about how to make it matter. I didn't want a viral post or a screaming match or some long-winded letter about how much they'd hurt me. What I wanted was for the right person to know. The one person whose opinion they worshipped. Growing up, there were always certain rules in our house. Things that didn't make sense to outsiders. Like how we weren't allowed to eat in the living room on certain nights. Or why my mom would buy expensive wine we weren't allowed to open. It was all about preparing for him. Dr. Malcolm Avery. He was the kingmaker. Ran the National Private Admissions Consortium. Former Ivy League dean. Respected. Untouchable. He came to dinner once when I was 11. I wore a dress I hated and was told not to speak unless spoken to. I remember that night down to the smell of the overcooked salmon my mom ruined because she was too nervous to pay attention to the oven. Caleb showed him a science project. My parents laughed too loudly at his jokes. They kept slipping in their client stats, their student success stories, their whole pitch wrapped in casual conversation. Me. I was there to smile, nod, and stay quiet. After he left, my parents buzzed like they'd just seen God. If we get Avery's trust, we're set, my dad said. That's all it takes. They spent the next decade obsessed with that man's approval. So when I was finally strong enough to sit at my desk without my legs shaking, I opened a blank email. And I wrote the truth. Not just a story. Not a rant. Just facts. I told him who I was. That I had met him once. That I was the daughter of Victor and Melissa Hart. And that when I was 15 I got sick. And that they had the money to help me, but they decided to save it for my brother's education. I told him I ran away. That my aunt took me in. That she sold her home, her savings, everything she had to keep me alive. I told him that my parents were still out there running a business based on the image of a loving, principled family, one that put children first. I attached proof. A rejection letter from the treatment center listing the exact cost. A text message from my mom telling Caleb to ignore me. She'll come back when she's tired of acting out. A screenshot of my dad writing, "Can't throw it all away on a gamble." And then I ended the message with one line. I thought you should know what kind of people you're working with. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. Not because I was scared. Because I knew the second I pressed that button, things would never be the same again. I didn't tell Ruth. I didn't need her to talk me out of it, or worse, to try to protect me from what might happen next. She'd already done enough. This part was mine. It was quiet, clean, private. And when I finally hit send, I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and poured myself a glass of water with hands that didn't shake anymore. I didn't know when things would start. I didn't even know if he'd respond. But I knew the one thing that mattered most. I had said exactly what needed to be said. To the only person who mattered in their world. I didn't need to scream. I just had to whisper in the right ear. I didn't hear back from Dr. Avery. I didn't expect to. But a few weeks after I sent the message, I noticed something strange. The badge on my parents' website, the one from the consortium, was gone. It had always been front and center. They used to brag about it constantly. Endorsed by Avery, they'd say. He only works with the best. Now it was just missing. I checked the consortium's directory. Their name had been quietly removed. No announcement. No drama. Just one clean cut. And then it began. At first it was little things. Their business page, which used to be full of 5-star reviews and glowing testimonials, started losing traction. A few reviews disappeared entirely. One school they were closely partnered with dropped them from a speaking panel without explanation. They posted less. Their smiles looked tighter. Then the real damage started. Rumors in parent groups. Posts hinting at unethical practices. One client pulled their contract and requested a full refund. They tried to pivot. New branding, new packages, even a name change. It didn't work. Their phones stopped ringing. Their inbox went silent. Clients ghosted them. Schools cut ties. Their reputation, once the entire foundation of their business, had collapsed without a sound. 6 months later, I heard they had to shut down their office. They moved everything into their home, then lost that too. I found out through a post on a local forum. Someone asking if anyone knew a cheap real estate agent because a couple in education consulting just defaulted. The address matched. They moved into a rental in a worse part of town. Still together, but barely. Not out of love. Out of necessity. I heard they fought constantly. Neighbors reported shouting. Once the police were called. They didn't split. Maybe they couldn't afford to. Maybe they knew no one else would want them. And through all of it, I stayed silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just watched. And I built. By the time I was 19, I had turned my tutoring side hustle into a full-time business. I specialized in helping kids with college essays, especially the ones who didn't have picture-perfect lives. I understood how to make their stories real. How to make them count. Word spread. Clients poured in. I brought Ruth on full-time. Admin, scheduling, managing emails. I paid her more than she'd ever made in her life. She never asked for a raise. Never asked for anything actually, but I gave it to her anyway. Because she gave up everything for me. On her birthday, I surprised her with a house. Small, sunlit near a lake. With a reading room and a kitchen that didn't leak. She cried. Then I cried. Then I booked her a trip to Greece. She'd always wanted to go. Said she used to have a photo of Santorini taped above her desk. She posted a picture from the trip. Her smiling, holding a glass of wine, the sea behind her. The caption said, "To my wonderful niece Elena, thank you for giving me a life I never dared to dream of." That was the post that changed everything. It made its way back to them. I don't know how, maybe someone shared it, maybe they searched my name out of habit or spite. But I know the moment they saw it. Because just days later they started reaching out. At first it was emails. "We're happy you're doing well. Let's reconnect. We'd love to talk." I didn't respond. Then came the texts. The calls. I changed my number. Then one day I saw them. They came to an event I was speaking at. Some small conference for student mentors. They waited outside until it ended. I walked out and there they were. I almost didn't recognize them. My dad looked older. His suit didn't fit right, his shoes were worn down. My mom had gray streaks in her hair, her makeup uneven like she hadn't worn it in a while. "Elena," she said. Her voice cracked. "Please. Just a minute." I didn't move. "We know we messed up," my dad said. "We've lost everything." My mom stepped forward. "We saw Ruth's post. We didn't realize how far you'd come. How generous you are. I stared at her. You mean generous like paying for someone's treatment so they don't die? I asked. She flinched. My dad spoke again. We were scared. We made mistakes. We didn't think. No, I said. You didn't think. You just decided I wasn't worth it. We were under pressure, my mom whispered. We thought Caleb's not talking to you either, I said. Because even he knows what you did. They were quiet then. Tired. We're not asking for much, my dad said. Just a little help. We're not doing well. I let the silence hang. And then I said, you told me you couldn't afford to save my life. I'm just returning the favor. My mom's lip trembled. My dad looked away. And I turned around and walked off the curb toward my car. They didn't follow. Later that night, Ruth asked me how the talk went. I told her it was fine. I didn't mention them. She smiled, poured us both some tea and started planning her next trip. I asked where she wanted to go. He grinned. Somewhere warm. With a hammock. We clinked mugs. And I thought, not for the first time. I didn't just survive. I built something. And I built it for the only person who ever thought I was worth saving.